It's a really weird one because this is one of the two greatest days in the history of Fijian women's rugby of all time, alongside their bronze medal at the Olympics in 2021. And yet there is a little bit, right, of we're talking about this as Welsh fans who are on the receiving end, on the troubled end here.
Yeah. I'd like to flash back to the final quote of last week's video on Wales v Canada, where I said, next week we're going to have to try and pivot the Fiji win against Wales as a positive for Fiji, rather than just a negative for Wales. And that is going to be the challenge for us today. I think we should try and separate this so we can do both the objective and the subjective viewpoint for us here.
And I think it's important to do that for both teams as well.
Yes.
Within that, can have four viewpoints on it. Because this for Fiji was enormous.
Yeah.
This was incredible. This is like their biggest win ever in 15s, right? Like, to win in a World Cup alone is huge. To win against a kind of... The tier system exists less in women's rugby, you know, because the tiers themselves are set off men's rugby, and the nations are still technically still tier 1, but based on their men's team's achievements. So Japan is still tier 1, but they very much feel like a tier 2 team in women's rugby, that kind of thing. But like, well, Wales are maybe the other way around. But there's this whole, like... There's very much felt in this World Cup, right? It's something that's been brought up a lot. Is like, oh, are there too many teams? Do we need to be cutting them? Do we need to reduce whatever? But like, then you have days like this, right? And it's so good that we've had this World Cup where the minnows have been consistently giving us entertaining moments and putting up a fight. And like, there hasn't been a single game, I don't feel, with any of these teams where they haven't had at least a handful of moments that you've gone like, oh, I'll remember that much more than I will the tries the opposition have scored. Right? Who came out of that France-Brazil game talking about any of France's tries, as glorious as many of them were? You came out talking about Bianca Silva's and a little bit about Pauline Baudon-Sansus. And that was the case across the board. I'm so glad we finally got one where the minnow actually won. Where that smaller nation actually came in and won. Like,
that is true.
That was sort of...
From an objective perspective,
quietly needed, was actually an upset. Was like... Not a big team against a big team upset, like a Uruguay, Japan in past, in the men's side of things, coming in and delivering and doing something heroic.
Yeah, like you look at South Africa was the other upset. South Africa beating Italy was the other upset, and that is a team who we all knew was on an upward kind of trajectory. Whereas with Fiji, I think there was a couple of question marks around where they actually
going
stand.
into the World Cup, certainly. I think once they arrived, and maybe actually that Canada game, there was a lot of like, oh, okay, they're not that great. Then we saw them turn up against Scotland, and there was very much a vibe of, oh no, actually this is what we hoped rather than what we feel.
Yes, exactly, because you see any team that is named Fiji, and you go, oh, they're going to have talented runners. They're going to have offloaders, they're going to have entertainers in their team. And we saw a bit of that in 2022, whereas this time around we've kind of seen the fruits of the labour a little bit, that we have seen them actually like give that a go and seen that the Fijian style of play is effective in 15-a-side women's rugby as well. Like, not that we had any doubts over that, but you know what I mean?
If anything, it's almost more effective, right? Like, because you have scrum, line-out structure, etc., is less important. And you've got to give some credit to Johan Cunningham as the coach, right? Who came in, and his whole thing with Wales was he wanted to get Wales box kicking more than anyone else in the world, and to some degree that worked at times and really didn't others. And then scrum, line out, fundamental, set piece, right? And often at the, other things didn't necessarily get that level of attention, right? But like Wales' core basics were extremely good. And what he's done with this Fiji team is build them out to a point in which their scrum incredibly solid. Right, like they could win their own ball very safely, line out winning their own ball very safely, other than that kind of final minute one. Wales nicked a couple, but like broadly, solid line out, stole some of Wales' balls as well. And ruck, like accuracy at the breakdown, incredibly high. And yet they never relied on it. I think he very smartly, and it's something that Cunningham's been very upfront about, is that he has been trying to learn words of Fijian so that he can praise his players in Fijian rather than in English. And he's been learning about the culture, and he's been learning this whole idea and trying to implement little bits of his philosophy into Fijian rugby, rather than overall coming in and going like, no, you're playing like this now. Right?
That's really important. Again, like you look at like when Ben Ryan went to the Fiji Sevens team, for having coached England beforehand, very different sorts of teams, and he went, well, they are the Fiji team. They are meant to be good at this. They're good at the offloading, this, that, and the other. I could strip them down and make the sensible team, but it's not what makes them good.
Yeah.
It's not the heart of how they should play and how they want to play. And I think Johan Cunningham's done a similar sort of thing, in that he's gone, there are fundamentals of the game, because like typically he's a forwards coach, Johan
feels
Cunningham.
like he's adding rather than changing.
Exactly. And he wants his forwards to be able to offload as well as being able to scrimmage, you know? And I think that is something that he's really implementing. He's done a brilliant job on.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I want to bring up a stat, right, about Fiji's performance. And this is something genuinely astonishing. I've never seen a statistic like this looking over anything from rugby in general, right? Fiji's pass to rucks count, right? Fiji went through 52 phases of possession, which is not a great deal.
No.
Wales were at like 118, thereabouts. They were 100-something teen. Fiji went through 52, which is, you know, like...
That's not
really low for...
To say that the possession was relatively even-handed.
A team in this World Cup in particular where possession is much higher, like the average phase count in this World Cup is drastically higher than it was in the Men's World Cup 2 years ago.
Yeah.
As is the speed to ball, as is tackle completion. Yeah. But like phase count in particular is the stat that like stands out most when you put it next to men's rugby. Fiji's was incredibly low, and yet their passes, I believe it was 116 passes. Right?
Right.
So, more than double, they're looking at it as 2.4 passes for every phase.
That's not a coincidence.
No.
That is them being coached, and also their inner belief that they've been raised upon since they were kids, is always get 2 passes away from contact. You know, do not just crash the ball in, see what's on out wide. And obviously it's risky, but when it works, it's box office.
Yeah. And so you think about an average passing sequence, right? Like you're looking at most 4 passes in there, right?
Sure.
So in order for the average to be 2.4, think about how rarely the team are doing one-up smashes off 9.
Yeah.
Right? And also how rarely they're picking and going.
Yeah.
Because like Fiji had some moments they got into 22 and they pick and go, right? So that brings it down to 0, the average on there. So suddenly they're skewing the average so drastically that it probably actually, if you went through sequences in which they weren't pick and goes, you're probably taking another like 10, 15 of those off.
Yeah.
And it's becoming even more drastic. It's coming to like 3 passes per phase. And that, for me, encapsulates how they played. It was constantly getting 2 passes, you say, away from contact at any given point.
Yeah.
And it really stretched the Welsh defence. This Welsh defence is incredibly physical, they're incredibly aggressive, they fly up an awful lot. However, if that team is not only getting it wide, but they're so good at it and they're so crisp at it, and every player across the team is so good. You look at Nehami's first try, right? And that is a really nice move, very similar to one Canada ran against Fiji themselves, right? Where they run a little dummy maul and they pop it off to a second row wrapping around who was previously in a dummy pod to kind of dummy jump. And then, except in this case, right? The second row, obviously we had like one Nepo baby and Sophie de Goody. This time, it's Sarevi is the name on the back of the shirt. So obviously, it should go without saying, they can reach through contact and throw the offload and bam, takes players out. But it's always looking for those passes, right? Like, that's the one that leads to a try. But how many times were we seeing those, like, front 5 forwards popping up, whether or not they've got the name of, you know, the greatest sevens player of all time on their back?
Yeah.
None of them did have Steph South Africa's name in, just like in tribute. How often do we see them just popping up and throwing passes, like, to each other more than necessarily like little flick out the back or a tip on, but like them linking up and them just feeling like rugby players? It felt a bit like watching a sevens team who had a very decent scrum. And 15 players. Yeah,
that double pump by Asanati Surevi is lovely on that, isn't it? Because that really engages Neumann behind, where she's already got 2 tacklers on her. And Josephine Naihamu is like one of the best ball carriers in this World Cup. Hits that line superbly. She's been so good all World Cup. Also, Sataito Railamu's try as well. You mentioned there the fact that they like to always go 2 passes away from contact, but they're not doing that for the sake of it.
No.
This is the perfect example where they instead shut it down and they go for a pick and go left. And Wales really slow to react to the previous ruck kind of getting back to its feet collectively. And Railamu, really good vision, snipes back to the blind side as Kaylee Powell is still trying to jam in with a couple of bodies in her way and manages to dive over. That Fiji I think just really streetwise at all times. That, as you say, like, it's one thing knowing how to throw these offloads, but it's another thing having the sort of game awareness to not do that at the right times.
It's this kind of heads-up rugby thing that fans are always talking about, coaches are always talking about, but actually you kind of can't just rely on it to happen. You can't just expect it to happen. Like it takes a team being incredibly well drilled and knowing each other, right? And it felt so instinctive. It's the thing we talked about the Black Ferns, is they seem to know where the next teammate was at all times.
Yeah.
And then it stood out whenever they made a break and they got tackled, because even though they had someone 20 metres away who wasn't in a realistic position, but you're just so used to them throwing those long balls or those like last second offloads as someone hits the gas. And it was a beautiful thing to watch, like, and being there in person, the ease with which Fiji were able to find the outside sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of these tricky things, right? Well, Wales' defence wasn't brilliant, especially in the first half. I think they really shored it up second half. But that is possibly always going to be the case, because you never play a team like this.
Yeah.
And the only time Fiji haven't caused these problems was against Canada, where Canada just dominated the ball, right?
Yeah.
And Fiji weren't able to get in possession. And when they did, they almost scored 2 more tries, and they did score 1. And if not for Canada being so accurate once they got into 22 and so good at finishing any line break, that could have been a different game.
Yeah.
Against Scotland, the ball was close to 50-50, and suddenly we see them really pushing them and really putting in a good performance. And then against Wales, the ball is more than 50-50. Fiji have a minor advantage in as an amount of possession, but like even if they had much lower phase count. But and yet they win, and they're going to win the game, right? And particularly first half, where Fiji did have the majority of possession, then bam, then suddenly it's 4 tries.
There's such a contrast here. I think it shows kind of the difference between Wales and Canada, doesn't it? That Canada are a team who are extremely careful with the ball, look after it brilliantly.
Yeah.
They very often in game go 10 plus phases, which is huge number. But like obviously a lot of teams in this tournament would do that, but Canada won the best at it. Wales, quite reckless with the ball at times. Will sometimes, throw one too many passes, try and go for an offload. You've got like Donna Rose here trying to pop the ball off the floor and it just goes forward.
Yeah.
And, it just felt needless and careless with the ball. And Fiji are a team who are so good on transition turnover ball. You look at how good was Adi Tove's try, where it's just like pure Fijian filth. Ditovutu's sit-down fend on Kaylee Powell. Kaylee Powell goes flying here. Like, it's absolute utter filth. And they go 2 more passes, get to the edge. Naihomu takes a bit of a risk in not passing this to Tove and going herself, but it does pay off because her offload is really good. And importantly, she gets Nell Metcalf on the floor by making her physically tackle her rather than just drawing her in, which means that Tove just has a 1v1 with Alex Callender, a winger against the number 8, rounds her and goes into the corner. It's just really smart by Fiji. That they like to move the ball as much as they can off turnover ball because they know that skill and pace are 2 things they'll always have.
Absolutely. Also really interested by the kicking game.
Yeah.
Which was incredibly specific. So they kicked the ball drastically less than Wales, almost half as often. I think if they kicked 1 fewer, it would have been half. And yet, if you look at the kicks they did put in, right? So Fiji kicked the ball from hand 12 times. 11 of those were to touch.
Wow.
So it was always looking for the same tactics, right? It was clearances, which is most of their kicks. And then on the rare occasion they did kick over the rest of the field, they were looking down the tram lines and they were looking to advance downfield and just like bank some extra territory and force Wales to exit from there.
Yeah.
There was almost no, I think there was 1 chip kick beyond that, which got called back for an offside. And that was 100% Fiji's kicking.
Yeah.
There was no contestable bombs, there was no box kicking, there was no slapping it down the middle and trying to win a kicking battle, there was no engaging when Wales tried to launch a kicking battle. They ran it back every single time, or they put it straight out into touch. Yeah. And it felt very much like the kind of Cunningham in them, right? There was a kind of like, you either run it or you very much don't. Like, you are one or the other. And that, I think, gave Fiji a kind of real basis to play off, was, okay, we either play or we don't. We either sit and smash it for our forwards, or we play really expansively.
Yeah.
And not having a kind of like very in-depth game plan where players are asked to weigh up, oh, you've got 16 decisions we want you to make in this situation. We've got, 15 versions of this. If it's like this, then do this. If it's like this, then do this. Perhaps consider how your defence is setting up like this. Whatever. It wasn't like that, right? They clearly stripped it back. They were like, no, you either kick for touch or you run the ball.
Yeah.
And from there, it became really easy for the players to just think about how they're playing the game.
Sure.
Right? They're not trying to remember a game plan. They're not trying to execute something. They're just looking up in front of them and going, okay, the step's on. Or, okay, this little pop pass is on, right? They don't have to remember about anything wider.
Yeah. It's really smart as well, isn't it? Because kicking in that sort of way means if you get a turnover, you're likely getting it on the edge.
Yeah.
You know, if Wales are scrapping with the
Yeah.
ball, which means that you can then weigh up the situation and you can get the ball wide. You've got a lot of options that you can take off that. And as you say, like, the whole point in any of this structure, any of this game plan, is to give Fiji moments of unstructured scenarios, which I know sounds counterproductive, but like, it's where they work. It's where they can just use their instincts and they can just play, you know, Fijian flair as we know it. So there's another side of this that we have to talk about. So Fiji, 100% the better team, absolutely brilliant. The other side of it is we were there as Welsh fans.
We were.
Right? And this is ultimately another crushing Welsh loss. That they have now been whitewashed in the World Cup. All they have to show for their name is one losing bonus point, which came out of this game.
Try bonus point.
Try bonus point. Oh, yeah, yeah. But all they have is that. And ultimately, that is quite crushing to contend with because this Wales team should be better. Yes. And the thing that annoyed me the most is there are so many players in this team that I looked at during that game and I was like, oh, I think she's actually having quite a good game. She's playing all right. And the thing that really kind of pisses me off is now for a lot of these Welsh players, or for this Welsh team, I guess, generally, playing all right or playing quite well is competing with Fiji and not winning. Yeah. As opposed to putting 40 on them or competing with the Black Ferns or Canada or Scotland or Ireland or whoever, you know? Yeah. And that, I think, is just that illustrates how far Wales have gone backwards in the last few years.
Yeah, I think the team selection for me was much better than it's been. You know, like, this was a solid team. Like,
I agree.
I think there are decisions made selection-wise for this game that should be the case going forward.
Agreed.
Karis Cox at 13 being the biggest one of those. I thought she
played really well.
Standout maybe for Wales. Her and Alex Callender, who was always exceptional, is just the best player Wales have available by such a margin. But Karis Cox was excellent in that 13 jersey and was actually able to get across, and we saw second half like do a much better job of shutting Fiji down, as well as hitting some really nice lines. Takes her opening try really nicely, and has a disallowed try later on. But you know, I know there's been some debate over this. Doesn't really matter, the referee didn't give it. But all the same, it's a really nice bit of kind of identification for her, and she is an inch, less than an inch, like a centimetre, off this being a second try that would win Wales the game, right? Yeah. So I thought she was excellent. And yet, we come back to, and I hate to keep repeating myself on this, structure, detail, like attention to detail, both attack, defence, set piece, everything. Like, nothing is really working. It's really shit as a Welsh fan, right, to be looking at this World Cup and going, this is a brilliant tournament. It is the best World Cup we've ever had. It's so open. It's so brilliant. It's such a celebration of rugby. 15 of the 16 teams have had a moment of big joy and celebration and a win in there, right?
There's a part of me that feels like Wales aren't a part of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This pure celebration, this festival of rugby.
Like, okay, Italy have had a disappointing World Cup. They're the other team that have a really disappointing World Cup. They still beat Brazil, and they still had like a really fun day of like running out and all their players scoring tries and scoring some great, fantastic tries, right? You look at teams like Samoa, have had plenty of moments where you've gone like, this is amazing. Yeah. And after that England game, like, the talk was all about how well they performed and how well they stood up and them kicking those points and so on. Brazil, likewise, like, only scored the one try, but what a try it was. Spain, you know, like, some incredible moments, even though they lost every game. Yeah. All of these teams scored against the Black Ferns and so on. And
5 tries against Ireland.
Yeah. All of these were like great moments of celebration. Wales haven't had one of those.
No.
Like, they were terrible against Scotland. They scored 8 points over the first 2 games. And then they lost the one game they should have won, right? Yeah. And Wales scored 5 tries in this game, so it was better than we expected. Like, they scored 4 tries more than they had over the rest of the tournament put together, which is a step forward. But all the same, like, it's hard to take the positives when you're losing to a team you've never lost to before. Yeah. And view that as a positive still, just because they managed to score some tries in the process. Yeah. Like, it's just kind of a bit shit to be sitting as a Welsh fan and going, well, we're the only team that don't get a moment. Literally everyone else has. Yeah. Like, all 15 other teams are getting big moments of joy, and we've just had nothing but misery. And like, all joy has been kind of secondhand and watching everyone else and being like, oh, isn't it brilliant for the Springbok women? Isn't it brilliant for the England women? Isn't it brilliant for whatever else?
So after this game finished, we decided to stick around for a little bit because it was like, well, if we don't get to soak in the Fijian celebrations, we are just going to be miserable.
Yeah.
Like, we might as well try and embrace the fact
Serevi was there.
it was a big day for the Fijians, right? And then when we were on the bus back to Exeter Town Centre from Sandy Park, we went round in circles with our conversation. Yeah. We were just talking about all of the same stuff we've talked about in terms of the coaching setup. I think anyone who's watching this has probably heard us rant on about the coaching setup and how much the WOU have neglected the national team in the women's game for several years now. And, you know, in the previous 2 videos on Wales, we have discussed that, right?
There was something interesting that Sean Lillicrap brought up on the Scrum 5 podcast.
Yeah.
Which is that these players, these coaches, other than Lynn, who's contracted for another year, most of them are contracted through to the end of the World Cup. So she said, like, the point she made was, like, not only has he inherited Johan Cunningham's coaching group, he's also inherited his playing group, right? So all of the current player contracts are ones handed out by Johan Cunningham, and Sean then hasn't had a chance to go, these are the 35 players.
It's quite funny considering Johan Cunningham's beaten them now.
I know, yeah.
It's a big setup. But, yeah, the issues remain in the same place.
Yeah.
That we look at the line-out isn't particularly great for Wales. And to say that, as you say, going into this World Cup, that wasn't an area that you would have said was one of Fiji's strengths. And yet, you know, here we find ourselves. The attack, I mean, obviously they scored a few tries, which is good in terms of that, but it's still generally quite predictable. Yeah. And
Wales' like accuracy once they got into 22 was much higher.
Yeah.
I also think, like,
but again, the ball's down
this
here,
Fiji team, like, they conceded 60 to Canada, right? Yeah. They conceded 5 tries, 6 tries against Scotland.
Sure.
Like, this is not a brilliant defensive team, they're a brilliant offensive team.
You score 5 tries, we'll score 6.
Exactly.
Type team.
And we scored 5 against them, right? Yeah. They scored 4, but they kept the conversions.
Yes, very, very crucial point. But there's one moment I think that really, really pisses me off. And if I was, you know, I'd imagine that the performance analysts and people in the Wales team, if they've even done a review, there is a chance that they've just said, just go home, draw a line under it. We're not even going to talk about it. But this is the thing that really frustrates me. And that is Josephine Naihanu's second try here.
Yeah.
It's terrible by Wales. Fiji, off the line out, make quite a poor pass. And it's fine. Like, Naihanu makes a bust through the middle. I get it. Like, it is what it is. Sometimes you come up against really good ball carriers and they don't need a good pass to get on the front foot. Like, she's a freak. Fine. Whatever. It is what it is. What really pisses me off is the second phase, because Wales just don't even think about coming off the line.
Yeah.
Wales just stand and watch Fiji. Fiji throw another poor pass and Wales just don't do anything. Yeah. Nobody is there calling the line saying, yeah, let's come up, let's get another win, let's get behind the gain line, let's, you know, push them back. There's nobody kind of leading that for Wales. And the thing is, the player it usually would be is Alex Canada, right? And they're purely reliant on her doing that all the time. But she considers going into breakdown and has to leave it, which is a good decision.
I certainly said during the Canada game, I can't remember if I said it on air, but there was a total lack of energy about Wales in defence, right, when Alex Canada isn't there. She is the one person who is shouting and screaming and revving everyone up for line speed. And
there needs to be 15 players doing that.
Like, just silence.
Yeah. So on the next phase, after this, and like Fiji get over the gain line, the Wales don't trouble them at all. They go to the blind side, and once again they switch it back to the open, and Wales go, all right, no worries, just run at us. And so Asanate Serevi, who we've mentioned, is a brilliant ball carrier, a brilliant offloader, and Wales just go, brilliant, come at us. And obviously she busts the tackle and offloads. Yeah. And Fiji, at this point, are on the front foot. Wales are just doing soak-up tackles, and bless Georgia Evans, she just makes a really good effort to actually get a woman to ground here. Like, but that's because her team have put her in a position where she's had to go for a tackle like that, because they've just been doing soak-ups, because they've been letting Fiji run at them. Naihamu then runs a brilliant line and steps around Blakey George and manages to crash over. And that is just like, if you look at the 79th minute when Wales are trying to win the game at that point, they put themselves in that position because 30 minutes earlier they weren't working hard enough, because earlier in the game they just let Fiji come at them and they were just, their energy levels dropped. And it's really frustrating because this is a Wales team who, I know on the majority of them, like, are good enough to play international rugby. I know what they bring to this team. And again, the majority of them, like, really want this and really work hard for this. And yet one moment like this where they completely switch off, and the other Fiji tries, like, fine, I get it. Like, that's them being brilliant. That's them having good moments of skill and getting around us and being really intelligent. This one I look at and it's like, that's just so soft from a Welsh perspective. We're a better team than conceding tries like that.
Yeah.
And like, sure, it's great by Fiji, but we know that they're good, strong carriers who can offload a ball out of contact. Like, why are we letting them do this? Why are we letting them do the thing where they express themselves and that lets them be good in rugby games? I don't know.
It comes back to, I think, so much of this is on the coaching, right? And if you get the proper systems in place and you get the players in a position where they are barking and they are shouting and they are like up for it, right? In a different way. I'm not saying they're not up for the game. Obviously, they're giving everything they can. But like, if you're giving yourself everything you can individually, you want that like assurance and like camaraderie of like the person next to you also shouting it and like feeling that with you, right? Like, so instead you've got 15 individuals giving everything. And like, this is the thing about everyone talking about the effort with Canada, the Canada game the week before. And yeah, like absolutely, you've got 23 players, all 3 games, giving everything. But what's the point if they don't look united? Work smarter, not harder. And again, we keep coming back to this, like their defence coach is a scrum coach who has been over-promoted because he can do both jobs. And their forwards and backs coach are people that only worked at academy level in the men's game. And then were kind of brought up from working under 18s and then over-promoted to the job, especially in Sean Connor's case where he's like a very good skills coach. And was brought in, instead of being a kicking coach, he's initially brought in, the W wants to save some money, so made him attack coach. And yet, like, the thing is, there's some nice stuff in there, like increasingly, like the opening try, Karis Cox's, is like quite a nice moment, right? Kaylee Powell, like last second drifting out into the boot, and it's suddenly opening up that short line for Cox to go over off that ball from Flaky. Really nice pass from Flaky George. Like that's a really lovely bit of like attack, of like actually thinking and moving, and it's sort of thing Wales weren't doing even 2 weeks ago.
Flaky George also eyeing up the long ball as well and going for the short ones. Nice bit of detail, nice bit of body language.
Sort of thing Wales weren't doing even 2 weeks ago. So like there is some growth there. I think there is like some improvement, and that's worth noting. However, you've got to come back to the fact like all these coaches are overstretched and overworked, especially Sean Lynn himself. And a lot of people are bringing it, has he improved this team? Is he improving anything? I think you've got to go, well, hold on, like what chances he had? He's had constant pressure on him. He came into the Six Nations with like 4 days prep and he was hungover for one of them. And then went on from there to like have a decent, an average campaign, you know, better than probably expectations, but also not brilliant. And has gone straight into this World Cup without any control over the squad, over the coaches. And having to do everything himself. Like, he has a smaller team behind him, not just in terms of players on the pitch, but like smaller backroom staff than he did at Gloucester Hartbury, right? Like, he has more strength and conditioning facilities, he had more assistant coaches, he had more help than he does with the national team. Like, the national team in comparison looks like he's taken an amateur gig. And you can't allow that to be the case when everyone else is improving this. And yet there is still this, like, there's still a layer on top of this of sometimes, though, the players are just making the wrong decisions.
It happens.
It's
the point in sport.
But that's the thing. It's like,
perfect.
You've got to go, right, you need the structures in place so that when a player makes a decision that's poor, it isn't the end of the world, right? But like, you look at this one at the end of the game, like right at the death, Wales are on the try line. Like, they are there. They are looking for the winning try. They're 3 or 4 metres out. And Flaky George is stood behind the ruck. She isn't interested in coming out. She does not want this ball leaving the ruck. She wants this crashing up, right? Kaylee Powell also plays tennis, been Wales' second choice tennis at this tournament, was playing fullback on this day, as she has many times for Wales in the past. She is, however, stood in and she calls the ball out from 10, right? She scored a try earlier on. She's clearly thinking of doing the same thing. However, Karis Cox is in front of her. Right? She's got 2 players outside her. Karis Cox, the next one along, is in front of her. Flaky George is not interested at all and just standing back, also in front of her at this point. What, like 15, 20 metres behind the game line? She's very deep. And she has no options other than run herself open. And it's just like, it's a baffling, mad decision to make for her to call the ball out. And then, quite obviously, right, because she's carrying on her own, because there's no one there, Karis Cox last second is not expecting this ball to come out, goes, oh shit, okay, takes a step backwards to get behind her, and it means once Powell reaches contact and gets tackled, Cox is late to arrive because she's just been going backwards in order to get behind her, and the ball gets turned over, Fiji win the ball and win the game from there, right?
You look at like Karis Cox, it's indecision from her. You know, if you want to run a line of 9, go flat and run a line of 9. That's fine. You know, trust your vision on that. But, you know, if not, you need to get behind the back line. And I feel like with Kaylee Powell, it was a case of the forwards aren't going anywhere, so that means we have to use the backs.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know.
Have some patience, have some vision around you. Like, look out, look at the other two sides.
Yeah. And again, like, I think panic and fatigue are kind of two big factors of that
but
at this
like,
point in the game.
I still think you can expect, even the 80th minute, panics. And I think there's a lot of desperation here. There's a lot of like, oh, I've got to be the one to be the hero now, I guess.
Yeah.
But check whether you've got someone behind you that you can pass to.
I get that.
Before calling the ball out.
There's, I think, two moments, kind of talking points from the end of the game we have to talk about. One of them is the fact that Wales get a penalty under the sticks and choose to go for it.
We were both saying, I was certainly saying kick the points, and you were saying, yeah, maybe.
I don't think a draw against Fiji would be... It's obviously better than our loss.
I was saying,
I don't think it'd be
a moment
much.
ahead of the margin being 2 points, and then kind of went like, oh, no, it's 3 points, so it'd be a draw. And then you kind of think about it, but...
And Wales do move forward off this quick tap, is the thing. And like they do create a try-scoring chance off this. It's not a try.
Regardless, my thought would be take a moment, take a breath.
I get that.
Collect yourself.
I get that.
The maul wasn't obviously as good as it's been, but like the maul's been Wales' one real weapon over the last 5 years, really.
I guess, yeah.
Since Cunningham came in.
Yeah.
So I kind of hated the decision to quick tap it, but also you've got to back the players on the field, right?
Yeah.
And like ultimately it isn't fast. Like Lockwood is initially looking to go for it, decides against it, then George goes, actually let's play.
Sure.
I don't think they really have anything set up here to go. And they managed to do a decent job off that carry.
Yeah.
But
what I do genuinely think is commendable is like there was no point where Alex Callender as the captain looks like she's contemplating a draw, like she's going, no, I want to win this. And she straight away is the person who sets up off flaky George and just goes like, give me the ball. Yeah. I want to run at somebody. And it's like, you know what, fair play, like you're trying to win the game at that point.
The frustration though is if Wales has got one of the conversions, and again, there's the charge down one, and there's some controversy over whether or not Kira Bevan has started a kick routine. Yeah. In the end of the day, again, doesn't matter because the referee thought she had. Regardless, that one you count off, right? There's still 4 conversions Wales miss. Yeah. Right? If they get one of them, then Callender wins that turnover, and George Powell, whoever it is in the moment, can knock it over.
Right between the sticks as well. Yeah.
And win the game. And Wales get out of jail. It wasn't the case, right? Yeah. Again, accuracy. Again, the fact, and this comes back to the same thing we keep saying over this entire tournament, over the Six Nations beforehand, we've been saying for 3 years, Wales' kicking coach, their goal kicking coach, is also the attack coach. Yeah. Because the W cheaped out on it, right? That's not only hurting the attack, it's hurting the kicking. Yeah. Right? If Wales had brought in a separate attack coach, maybe they're scoring more tries, maybe they're competing with the other two teams, but they're also allowing their goal kicking coach to focus on the goal kicking rather than going, I'm shattered because I've been running an attack single-handedly and also trying to work on, passing skills and so on.
Yeah, and I do feel for Kira Bevan because 9 times out of 10 she's a good goal kicker. Yeah. And she would get a lot of the kicks that she misses. But yeah, the one more moment I think we have to talk about the last thing that happened in this game. So Fiji get a scrum 5, and importantly, it is not their scrum half who passes the ball into touch here. It is their number 8, passes it back, and the ball goes over the head of the 10 in the pocket, and the ball goes straight out. Yeah. Now, the referee then has a conversation with a touch judge about this and goes...
And very notably not Alex Callender.
Not Alex Callender. I think we all know what point Alex Callender was trying to make here. And she kind of says, I think that was a genuine attempt to pass the ball, so, you could just dot it down or kick it out or whatever. So I'm not viewing this as a deliberate pass into touch. I'm not viewing this as a penalty offence. Yeah. We typically have the no ref chat policy on this, but there has been a lot of chat around this particular decision. I guess what's your thought on that as a whole?
I think it's a genuine attempt. I think she is absolutely trying to pass that. It's just an absolutely terrible pass.
Yes.
I also think there's a level of this in which you go, well, she has still done something illegal.
Yeah,
and I think it's a grey area because you never see these. I remember, I remember Bath being penalised for this, for Michael Clarson's in about 2009-10. Very decent player. Famously scored off the box cease thing. But him going to do this, missing the fly half, it being penalised, I think against it was a French team, I think maybe Clermont.
I'm not going to put the footage in of this.
No. Good luck finding it. He goes to pass it back to the 10, misses the 10, got penalised. They go on to, I think they do win the game in the end, but all the same, he got penalised for it because the referee's just I know you were trying to hit the 10, but you aren't allowed to do that. You can't just pass the ball in this touch. And I think maybe it's having seen that once 15 years ago. Yeah. And I say
and that won't have been the last play, I'm guessing.
It was the last play.
Was it?
The last play,
That's mental.
So it was the last play. He went back
That's me told.
And missed touch. And missed the 10 and just went into touch, and the referee penalised him. I believe it was John Lacey was the referee. You can't set precedent
ref.
off one thing that happened in one obscure club game 15 years ago.
Sure.
There's one Champions Cup or Heineken Cup game.
I'm completely behind the referee's decision on this.
I don't disagree with the referee's decision, but I think if I was the referee, I probably would have given a penalty anyway. Partly because I'm Welsh, but partly because
I've thrown enough of these passes over my 10's heads before to know that this is a thing that just happens. Especially it wasn't the 9 who threw it.
There's a
to
bit
say
of
it was
me
from
that
8
thinks-
on a backpedaling scrum. Like that, of course, that's going to happen.
But
and
there's-
also, if she caught the ball, she was just going to dot it down.
That's it. But like, there's a bit of me that thinks it's a bit like a seatbelt tackle. Like, I know there's no fault here, but like ultimately it is a penalty.
And ultimately as well, like the ball is so close to her hands, literally one fingertip, and that's not considered that. That's just called like the ball's just gone into touch off a dropped ball.
Wales probably would have blown the opportunity anyway.
Yeah, of course they would have.
Who knows?
Of course they would have.
I think ultimately, right, like it's one we can argue over, and it's a great moment of drama at the end.
Yeah.
I can't argue with the decision the referee makes at
course
all,
not.
and I don't think anyone really can, because like it's clearly a genuine attempt.
Yeah.
It's just like there is accidentally a penalty offence committed in the process.
Yeah.
There's a penalty that says it's going to be deliberate, so it comes back to like how do you draw the lines deliberately? Because that law is so vague, right? And this is where the debate comes, because you can't deliberately pass the ball into touch, or pass it dead, but is the law that you can't deliberately pass the ball and it goes dead, or that you can't deliberately pass the ball into touch?
I think the latter.
Yeah, but like there's a level of grey area there. Right?
Sure,
Like, she's deliberately throwing the ball towards the touchline.
Yeah.
And whatever.
Regardless, Fiji win the game. They are much the deserving team
And
to
the
win.
absolute scenes at full
Yeah.
time.
The Fijians love it. And as I say, we stuck around to kind of watch them celebrate and let them take it in. Can I tell my anecdote?
Please.
So, after the game, we go back to our hotel. We had been sent there by the lovely folks at Vodafone, who got us our hotel, our travel down, our tickets to the game, everything.
There'll be
was
something
brilliant.
on their socials about all of this
Soon. Yeah. There was this weird complication with my hotel room. It was no one's fault. Like it was just a thing. And basically the hotel kind of said like, I'm so sorry, mate. We can't get you in tonight because there's this weird complication. They had no room left, whatever. Anyway, Vodafone being brilliant to us, then went, okay, no worries. Do you want to stay at this hotel? It's 10 minutes down the road. And I was like, yeah, all right. Cheers, lads. So they've booked that, very nice of them. I then went and walked to this hotel, and there in the lobby, as I went to check in, there was a Fijian flag on the wall and a sign that said, congratulations Team Fiji on your win, and a load of glasses of Carver. And I looked to my left and there's a load of Fijians drinking, like Fijian fans, people in Fiji shirts, whatever, all drinking. I check into my hotel and I walk through the lobby and I look to my left and I go, oh my God, it's Waisali Serevi, the king. And bear in mind, a part of our motivation... A part of our motivation for sticking behind after the game was like, can we see the king?
Yeah.
Like, can we find him? Is he here? And then he's only there in the hotel room. So I text you immediately saying like, oh my God, the king is here. And you're like, no way. That, you know, you ended up having to move hotel and you end up bumping into Waisali Serevi. I didn't get a photo with him. He is one of the few people in rugby. Now that I do this as my job, he's one of the few people in rugby that is cool enough that I would want to go and get a photo with him. But also, like, he's a genuinely cool and like borderline intimidating figure, even though he seems like such a nice bloke. Like, but yeah, regardless, Waisali Serevi was in there. Anyway, I come back out, I meet you, we go and watch the other two games that we'd missed in the day. We watch them as live, having avoided the score. I then go back to my hotel later on and realise I think I'm staying in the Fiji team hotel, as I see their coaching team having a few drinks at the hotel bar, and I have to do a walk of shame in my Wales shirt. And Johan Cunningham, the former coach of Wales, kind of clocked me and like smiles at me, and I just like said to him like, fair play, like congratulations, you know, you're the better team, best of luck kind of thing. And I think Cunningham had a few beers, deservedly so.
Absolutely.
There with the rest of the Fijian coaching team, and then safe to say the next day when I got up for breakfast, I was really hoping I'd find Serevi. Sadly, not
Carrying
to be.
his plate like this.
Yes, indeed. But I did see the rest of their management team and stuff like unloading all the bags, like 1,000 Fijian kit bags into their lorry after the game, and after they finished their.
Were they like backhand offloading them in?
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, I accidentally found myself staying last minute in the Fiji team hotel on Friday night, and yeah, pretty spectacular scenes.
Yeah, no, it really sounded it. Yeah, no, I did not have such a spectacular evening.
No, it did slightly take the edge off it, going like, Well, at least like I'm in the same building as Waisali Sarevi. That's
Yeah.
quite cool.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
There's worse ways to spend an evening.
Yeah.
Which are just every evening I've ever spent, not in the same building as Waisali Taravi.
Yeah.
That I know of. That I know of. He may have also been to the Cineworld Birmingham once. So, Fiji win.
Fiji win.
Overall reflection of this World Cup for Fiji perspective. First,
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Like genuinely brilliant. The fact that they are now on the map as what we consider the Fiji men's team to be.
that's it, isn't it? Yeah.
They now have that in women's rugby,
Yeah.
and that's a result. That's what I think they came to this World Cup to do, and they've achieved that as far as I'm concerned.
that is exactly what I'd say. Right, they have moved themselves into this really special air that the Fiji men hold.
Next World Cup, they can move the goalpost if they want.
Yeah, yeah. Next World Cup, they can target their first quarter-final spot.
Yeah.
But they pulled off this win now. Last time they turned up and they
Or
were
at least expect a win or two.
Yeah, they're
Like,
brilliant value
huge.
last time. This time they're more than that, and next time, who knows?
Yeah.
Sky's the limit. Reflections from a Welsh point of view, very quickly. Overall reflections on this World Cup, yeah.
Like terrible. The Scotland game was one of my least favourite games as a Welsh fan ever. The Canada game was nothing. And the Fiji game was a disappointment. So absolutely terrible. I think they've been my least favourite team to watch in this World Cup, and I support them.
Yeah, yeah. Belinda Moore infamously said before this game that this World Cup was not a failure because more people were turning up and more people watching than ever before. Would you say this World Cup is a failure for Wales?
Yes.
Agreed.
Because we knew that people were going to turn up anyway.
Yeah.
And like 3 years ago, we were targeting a semi-final. And sure, you've got to move the goalpost. You've got to be realistic because there's been Six Nations failures since then. But yes, this World Cup has been an abject failure.
Yeah, I completely agreed. I think from a rugby point of view, you can't argue otherwise.
Yeah.
From an overall point of view, you've got to go, yes, more people are turning up, more people are watching, more people are
All
travelling
16
down.
teams have that.
But exactly. But on top of that, right, how many more people would be coming down if Wales were winning?
Yeah.
Right? How many more people would be turning up and how many more people would be tuning in if Wales were where Ireland are or where Scotland are? Like, you're just in a situation...
And that's on the WIU.
Yeah. Like, they are... Look, there is a rising tide raising all boats. And the WIU, Wales, are on that tide being risen by what England and by so many other nations have done.
Yeah.
And so they're going up naturally on their own. They're not doing shit.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a group of players who deserve much better. And there's a handful of coaches who deserve much better.
Yeah.
But, hey, there we go.
Vinaka.